Thank you so much for joining us on At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson, and for the next half hour, we're going to attempt to cover the issue of gun control. I say attempt because we need more than a half hour to do that, but we'll talk as much as possible about not only gun control, but mental health. And to have that conversation, we've invited Dr. Arun Pinto, who is the medical director at the Human Service Center in Peoria. Thank you, Dr. Pinto, for joining us. Also here is Richard Pearson. Richard is the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. Thank you for being here. And also joining us, Mark Walsh. Mark is the campaign director for the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence. And before we get into the conversation, just to be clear, let's show you the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And that Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The Illinois Constitution, Article 1, Section 22, also has very similar wording. Is there any question as to what the Second Amendment means?
That will go on in the courts for many years. So
absolutely, I think that's one of the questions is, you know, what is not only the courts have affirmed that you have the right to keep and bear arms, but with some limits, and I think those are going to continue to move back and forth, like Richard said, and what we can't legislate will probably be litigated.
It doesn't say with some limits in here, does it?
no, but all rights have limits. For example, if you go to the Supreme Court of the United States, every year there are illegal search and seizure suits, and we've had that settled for many years in this country, yet the limits are always being tested, and there are always going to be cases on it, and so this is going to go on for a very long time.
Before we get to the mental health aspect of this question, let's talk about some of the proposals that the Obama administration has put forth. Let's start with assault rifles. What's the definition of an assault rifle?
Well, the definition of assault rifle is a fully automatic firearm.
Means you pull back the trigger and it keeps shooting until it runs out of bullets.
Until you let the trigger go. It's also known as bandolier torpedoes, which are not around too much anymore.
So, and do you have a problem with a ban on those?
No.
Okay, and that essentially exists. Well, it existed in 1994. That expired in...
No. You talked about the fully automatic firearms. That's been banned since 1934.
34.
Okay, and in Illinois, it is banned, even though you can't get a federal license for these if you're a civilian, but that's not permitted in Illinois. They're banned also in Illinois.
Semi-automatic, what is that?
That's where you have to pull the trigger each time for it to discharge.
Okay, and your position on whether or not we should be allowed to have semi-automatic weapons?
I don't think we need these military-style weapons, whether they're automatic or semi-automatic. They're designed for killing people, and we don't need those in our communities.
What is the specific aspect of that you don't particularly care for?
Killing people in the communities?
No, the design of the weapon. You have to pull the trigger one time to get a bullet, then the next time, then the next time.
Well, it's still a rapid-fire mechanism that allows you to discharge as quick as possible.
Well, we disagree with that. 80% of the firearms sold in the United States now are semi-automatic. And there are 4 million AR-15s. There are many other types of semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. Women particularly like them because they don't recoil as much. It doesn't hurt to shoot them. And so we think that for self-defense purposes, for competition purposes, people should be allowed to own those. And besides, the Second Amendment says it shall not be infringed.
I mean, your opening line, though, is we've talked about you have rights that have limits. And I don't think there's any need to have those types of weapons in a civilized country.
Let's add one more dimension to this. The size of the clip, the ammunition clip. The banana clips can have 30 shells in it. Do we really need clips that large?
Well, the answer is this is the United States. And if you want to own a piece of sheet metal in a certain shape, which is mainly what these things are, or some plastic thing, then you should be able to do that. if you're a person in a self-defense mode, if you're in your house, if you need as many rounds of ammunition as you can get to defend your house. If you don't have that many, you may be overwhelmed. We had a case in Atlanta, Georgia 2 weeks ago where the lady only had 5 rounds, and the people thought she had more than that, and they left. But if they attacked her more, that would have been the end of her. So the other thing is that the people can say, well, you can change the magazine from one magazine to another. If you're the average homeowner or the average person in a self-defense mode, all of your fine motor skills go away. So if you have to change that magazine, the chances are that you're going to have trouble with it. And so from a self-defense aspect, you should be able to have as many rounds as you think you need.
Magazine size.
There's no need to have these massive clips that hold multiple rounds over. We would like the limit at 10. Over that, I mean, it's, as Richard said, all of a sudden, if you don't have those fine motor skills and you're just pulling the trigger repeatedly, who knows what you're hitting? When you talk about hunting and things like that, if you need 30 rounds of ammunition to kill a deer, you probably should get a new hobby.
Well, those are not really designed to kill a deer, and we all know that. They're designed for self-defense purposes. And so, if you have many people, who are on amphetamines or other drugs, and they're attacking you, they don't go down easy. So you're going to have to hit them several times before you knock them down, even with an AR-15.
In the interest of compromise, is there some sort of area where we can compromise on the size of a magazine?
Probably not.
I don't know. I mean, we've been having this debate for how long?
Years.
Yeah.
One other aspect of the Obama administration's recommendations is background checks for gun shows, things of that nature. Don't we already have background checks?
We do. Illinois closed the gun show loophole in 2005. We still would like to see the private sale loophole closed, where approximately 40% of all sales go through this private transaction. In Illinois, you need a FOID card, but if Richard's selling me a gun and I have a FOID card, all he has to do is see it. It doesn't have to be run through that system, and that means that yesterday I could have had an order of protection filed against me that made me a prohibited purchaser. So that's why we need to close all of the background checks.
Your position on closing all the loopholes?
Well, I don't think private sales need to be dealt with, particularly in Illinois, because we do have the FOID card, and it's not that simple. I have to keep all of Mark's information if I buy it from Mark or he buys it from me. I have to keep the serial number of the firearm. I have to keep his Social Security number. I have to keep his FOID card number, and I have to keep those for 10 years. So if there's ever a trace put on that gun, it goes from the dealer to me, to Mark, or in this case, I guess from the dealer to Mark to me. But anyway, so it can be traced in that manner. If you don't sell a firearm to anyone who does, or buy a firearm from anyone who does not have a FOID card, you're committing a felony in Illinois.
We're going to talk about the current laws and whether or not we're enforcing them or not, but I want to get to one of the big issues that came out of Newtown, and that is mental health. How do we define mental health with regard to the ability to own a weapon or maybe some other issues?
Well, I don't know that the issue is mental health versus an issue of dangerousness, which can exist with or without mental health problems. So I think in the context of mental health, there are definitions of when a person loses the ability to hold a firearm and to carry a firearm or to have a FOID card. And one of those restrictions is if somebody is admitted psychiatrically. They're not then permitted to hold a FOID card unless a psychiatrist then certifies them not a danger to themselves, and they got to reapply and have a hearing and get their FOID card and their license back. There is a statute on the books too that's fairly recent, I think from 2004, I believe, that says that's reportability exists even in an outpatient setting, that if somebody is deemed as an outpatient to have danger associated with them, then they have to be reported to the state and they don't have the license to carry a FOID card.
but do we have the resources in order to make sure that these procedures are followed?
Well, we don't have the resources to do much of anything, including treat adequately the people that need to be treated. So I don't know what happens at a regulatory level, but certainly, I've heard anecdotally that, when we've reported outpatients who we are concerned about, we hear back that they were contacted by the state and told, turn in your FOID card. I don't know how effective that is, but makes you wonder, whether that is being enforced adequately.
Does the Illinois State Rifle Association have a position with regard to mental health?
Well, we think there should be mental health background checks. And in fact, the law that happened in 2004 or 5, that was actually between us.
Yes.
And so there were not resources, but we were happy to learn yesterday, at least I was for the first time, that there have been 18,000 records entered into the FOID card system that weren't there before from 1968, from the inception of the FOID card. So those things exist now. When those things go into the FOID database, they are also reported to the National Instant Check System, so it works nationally. So if you're an Illinois person, but you go to Indiana to buy a firearm or go through a background check, if you're prohibited in Illinois, you're prohibited everywhere. So that does exist. There has been some difficulty, though, with people reporting. Some courts have not been reporting it, and they're getting cracked down on right now. They're being forced to report those people who are adjudicated mentally ill, facilities who are not who haven't reported people who've been in the facility for mental problems. Those things are actually getting much better now. I think we're actually finally getting a handle on it.
I wonder, though, there are many people that are admitted to the hospital for depression, family situations, that make them sad uncontrollably or make them at risk to hurt themselves. They lose their FOID card too. What would be your position to advocate for them to have the right to hunt again if hunting was their passion?
Well,
just because they were admitted to psychiatric hospital.
I think we all sit around here realize that there are different levels of mental problems. Most of us of my age anyway have seen friends go through divorces, and for a few days or a few weeks, they're pretty unhappy and they're pretty uncomfortable, and then they spend the rest of their lives and they're fine. Those people should be able to go through a hearing and get their FOID card back. That exists. The hearing situation, though, in Illinois isn't very good, but so that needs to be improved. And also, if you are been treated for alcoholism or drug addiction, those things are also prohibitors, and those are in the FOID card list also.
Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, particular position with regard to this issue?
As Richard said, we worked together to get the mental health as part of the background check system. He also mentioned the records that have been added. One of our concerns is the records that haven't been added, and originally it was estimated about 120,000 of those records in Illinois alone haven't been entered. So we need to make sure that whether it be mental illness or anything else that makes you a prohibited purchaser, that you're getting into that background check system. We need to make sure, especially as we move forward into some of the issues with concealed carry, that that system's fixed before we start issuing new permits.
The question that I have is regarding at what point do you say that person shouldn't have a FOID card?
Well, that's an individual clinical judgment that, there are no measurable ways to determine that, and it's often unpredictable. But if you see, for example, a history of violence, if you see concomitant substance abuse, particularly the hallucinogenic drugs or the methamphetamines, combined with that, there are certain populations that are more at risk. Lower socioeconomic groups are more at risk. People with substance abuse issues are more at risk, and young males are more at risk. So those determining factors, and you got to put that in the context of the whole history of the person.
Well, the young man who perpetrated the killings in Newtown, I won't mention his name because I believe that he wanted notoriety and I won't give him the notoriety. But the young man who perpetrated this, he wasn't listed in any database as having a problem. The next step was he stole the weapons, stole them from his mother. So is there any way to control that kind of scenario?
Well, I would say this about the topic in general. All of us would like to draw a nice line that would define this side is yes, this side is no, but those lines don't exist in humankind. Everything has to be judged on what's best for that situation, I believe. It's like the doctor may have two patients. They may be brothers, had similar situations, but one handles it fine and the other doesn't handle it so well. Okay, and so that's the kind of judgments that you have to make there, and somebody has to make those, and only a person with a clinical background can make those kinds of judgments.
With the issue of the young man that you addressed, I don't know a lot about his background, but one of the things that might have prevented that from happening is if, he's been described as an unusual kid. Perhaps he was bullied. Perhaps he was, people had identified him as being different from the very start. If there were systems in place to address that at a school level, if counselors had been aware of that and begun to nurture him with kindness, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. I don't know that. But what we need is an early identification and prevention process that starts at a school level, identifies kids that might be at risk and gives them the help right from the very start.
And we need some funds to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, that's true, but it's part of the educational system, and so one of the proposals that we made yesterday in committee, which was on Tuesday, the 19th, was that we have a system where we start checking some of these young people in grade school, and we've all known children that we've looked out in our neighborhood, in our yard, maybe in our own home, that said this kid has got a problem and he's going to be trouble. We need to look after those children so we can remediate that and prevent them from becoming drug dependent, from becoming mentally ill, because what happens in the society is we seem to wait till these people are too far gone and then we try to resuscitate them when we should just teach them to breathe on their own in the beginning and let it go at that.
I want to move to concealed carry because, Mark, you mentioned concealed carry a few moments ago. Illinois, the only state in the nation without a concealed carry law. Your organization's position?
We've been one of the leaders in stopping legislation to allow that. Our organization has always believed that more guns don't make you safer, and having concealed weapons make you even less safe. That being said, we recently had a decision from the 7th Circuit Court saying that the General Assembly had 180 days from when it was issued in December to enact some kind of carry. We think that any kind of carry that is being talked about has to be the strongest in the country and have things that we've talked about already, background checks in it, reporting of lost or stolen firearms, things that make it a comprehensive bill. If you want to carry, and the most important thing is that local municipalities have the right to regulate who has it and not a state policy.
Those with home rule.
Correct.
Well, we agree that we should have concealed carry. Mark talks about a may issue. We talk about a shall issue. We believe all citizens who pass the background check, who pass the class, who pass the proficiency exam, who have the right attitude, should be able to do this. And so we're not for a may issue situation. We also are not for home rule overruling this. One of the things that can happen is I can drive from Peoria, Illinois to Peoria Heights, Illinois, and I don't know when I'm there. And so I can become a criminal simply by crossing the center line of a highway and not knowing that I'm in a prohibited area. And if you are in a prohibited area, then it's almost impossible to unload your firearm, put it away anyway, because as soon as you get out of the car, you become a criminal. So we don't think that the home rule should prevail. We have seen home rule communities, and I have personally been a mayor of a town, And one of the people you have to be careful of in any local government, or sometimes at the state government, are people who think they're God's gift to local government. They are very, they're very, they think that they were elected king or queen, and that's not true. So we need to take these unreasonable powers away from these people and use something called preemption and prevent them from exercising power over firearms from 1 inch of a center line to the next.
Mark, under your scenario, if home rule communities were allowed to opt out of concealed carry, how would you handle a situation such as was described by Richard?
I think, a lot of those communities, you know exactly when you're in that community. I think and one of the reasons we support a May issue is because local law enforcement knows the person who may be not charged with a crime, but may come out of the bars every night, belligerent with a few in them and go home and, or her, and go home and become a domestic violence situation that never gets reported. Those are people who shouldn't be allowed to have guns, and you get that, I think, in a local community where law enforcement knows people better than the state police do.
If there's a person like that, any policeman or any police chief, any sheriff, or any state police officer can report that person to the FOID system and have their right to a firearm revoked, at least until they go through a hearing.
I'm going to ask a rather vague question of the two of you, and hopefully you will have a specific answer.
Oh, okay.
Is there any place where we can compromise on some of these issues with regard to gun control?
Well, the answer is probably not.
We're going to have to make a decision somewhere with this decision hanging over our state. I think we have to try to work on a compromise. It's very, as Richard said, I think it's going to be a difficult road. But I think when you start looking at what we've seen in public opinion polling and things like that, is most people support these reasonable restrictions on not only on concealed carry, but on guns in general.
Well, I think that's what the legislative process is about. You hammer out these compromises whether you want to or not. Okay?
You may not agree.
Right.
but that's right.
Right.
But something has to get done. We're under a court order. Something has to get done.
June 8th, is that the deadline?
June 8th, yes. Some people think it's June 9th, but I don't know that it matters too much because the legislature's out the 31st of May. So it is really the 31st of May is the answer. And none of this stuff that we've talked about stops this from going on. Some of you have heard about the Attorney General appealing it back to the 7th District, but that doesn't stop the clock. Right. The clock keeps running.
Let me close the half hour with Dr. Pinto. Is there a solution on the mental health side of this?
More money, more money, more money.
Okay. Well, that was a simple answer, wasn't it?
Right.
We're abysmally funded. We don't address a large population of patients that need help. The system is overloaded. The jails are becoming the new psychiatric hospitals because people commit crimes and then end up in jail and they're not adequately treated. In its infinite wisdom, the state has decided that now anything over 4 drugs that are prescribed for a patient are not authorized. So if you have more than 4 medicines, you've got to get them prior authorized by the state by calling a pharmacist someplace in God knows where to say, can I prescribe this medicine for my patient? And that includes medical and psychiatric medicines combined. So, the statutes come at us and we're not able to adequately treat the people that need treatment.
I think one of the things that Mark and I agree on is that the more money needs to be spent on these background checks, on the reporting and that sort of thing. And one of our problems is money also. So we think that has to come along. And I totally, and it's not my issue, I'm very unhappy with the funding level the state of Illinois gives mental health. It is an atrocity as far as I'm
And he said you're in agreement with
We
this?
agree on that, absolutely, 100%. And one of the proposals from the Obama administration on the federal level is more funding for mental health.
And with
hopes-
that's a proposal, and we'll have to leave it at that because we're out of time. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Arun Pinto, who is the medical director at the Human Service Center in Peoria, to Mark Walsh, the campaign director for the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, and also to Richard Pearson, the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. Thank you so much all for being here. And obviously, we were not going to come to a resolution. We knew that from the get-go, but we hope it stimulates conversation in your home. Next week, we'll be back with another edition of At Issue. We'll be discussing truancy and dropout rates in Central Illinois and programs that are in place at the regional offices of education to try to correct that situation. Join us next week for another edition of At Issue.